Hi everyone, Big the Mistake Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new venturing album, Ghostholding. Here we have the debut album of a music project that, if you closely follow this channel, it shouldn't be entirely new to you, as the mastermind behind it is a somewhat relevant figure in the internet-based underground music scene today. Of course, I'm talking about songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer, and artist who has multiple pseudonyms and side projects to their name at this point, Jane Remover. And even though the history of venturing for Jane does go back a few years, we are hitting a landmark moment here, with this being, again, the first official debut studio record. The word studio being used with big quotes, because this album is quite lo-fi, which we will get into. Now, I guess the question to ask off the bat is, why the name venturing? Why this record? Why this sidestep, seemingly, in Jane Remover's artistic progress, especially with a new record under the Jane Remover name, slated to be released very soon? Well, one of the only reasons why I think going into a project like venturing for this batch of songs particularly makes sense is just how different aesthetically it is from Jane's recent work under the Jane Remover name, other stuff Jane has put out recently. Because the greater web of Jane's discography is so versatile and all over the place, it only makes sense that they would kind of play with this idea of identity and alternative ways of presenting their work. I think this forthcoming Jane Remover album is going to be one of their most high-profile projects to date too. And the tracks on this venturing album, as I said, are venturing in a much different direction. Across this record, we have a very consistent 13 tracks and 51 minutes of material, which is very much not cut from the same cloth as recent singles such as Jur 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 Jur, Flash in the Pan, as well as Magic I Want You. We have more of a straight-up rock affair on this record, which in a way you could compare aesthetically to recent releases such as Census Designated, but I feel like these two projects are very much distinctly different, especially considering how loud and dense and overpowering a lot of the sounds and mixes on Census were. Meanwhile, Ghostholding, by comparison, though it is in its own way a very noisy record, there's a bit more breathing room, more of an emphasis on riffs and grooves, and overall this record seems almost like an artistic challenge for Jane to do a lot with a little, because given just how lo-fi the instrumentation and mixes on this record are, there's only so much room and space for nuance and color and layers, as a lot of the tracks on this thing are driven by relatively blown out drums, muddy bass, raw guitars too, that have almost a 90s slacker rock or shoegaze flair to them, really bringing Big Dinosaur Jr. as well as Sonic Youth vibes. And again, while the mixes on this record may be kind of messy, I think the overall listening experience is a more pleasurable one than Census was, and most certainly leaves more room for passionate vocal performances, especially on the spacier, more motif-type cuts that are very meditative and low-key, whether that be Something Has to Change or Guest House. The more rockin' cuts on the record really go off as well in terms of just bringing a visceral energy and some tight drums and guitars, like on the track RECOIL, which is just pure 90s underground rock and roll through and through. The first leg of Dead Forever is also just like some living, breathing, Smashing Pumpkins worship, which eventually launches into this incredible anthem whose melodies are so sharp they just slice through the lo-fi muck and distortion and haze that the mix on this track offers. Now, if there is one major issue with the LP for me, there is an overall lack of variety, and I do think the record has a relatively weak start, with Playing My Guitar being one of the blandest cuts of the bunch in this track list. Also, the song No Sleep straight up features a terrible non-starter type drum beat, which doesn't really sync up all that much with the guitars or the vocals at all. I kind of feel like I'm listening to the drums, guitars, and singing all respectively do their own thing. The following track is slightly better, but not by much. But once the track list on this thing starts dishing out highlights, the record really hits its stride, whether it's with tracks that take the form of barn burners or slow burners that hit these really thick, heavy, loud, noisy, chaotic peaks toward the end. Spider, We Don't Exist, 6/Relapse. Famous Girl is another highlight on the record, which is a really kind of cute, endearing meditation on Jane's feelings with their relative fame they've built for themselves off of their art and music. It's not flexing, it's not braggy, it's a track whose lyrics are still riddled with fear and anxiety and concern, but there's still an appreciation going on here in the writing. Jane seems more thankful than anything in terms of how they're spelling their feelings out on this one. The final two tracks on the record, I think, more or less are okay. I don't see what musically or aesthetically they bring to the project that all of the previous songs didn't already. Might be a bit of a case of this record overstaying its welcome a bit, while we do get a lot of tracks and quite a bit of material with, again, almost an hour of runtime. I wouldn't say it's like the most versatile chunk of tracks I've ever heard in the lo-fi realm. Still though, on this record we have a lot of highlights, some really solid performances when they are great, standout songs that are somehow memorable despite how much noise they're caked in, some solid riffs and playing, and some really respectable kind of throwback 90s worship too, which is why I'm feeling about a 7 out of 10 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, venturing forever.